that we have made it. We have made it through all of the houses, the signs, the planets, and we've just like briefly touched the surface of how deep this knowledge can get. And just the more that you listen and participate and look at charts, the more it's going to make sense. And the fact that you all have stuck with it for 12 weeks and you're here at the last day, it's triumphant. It's a big deal. You guys, oh, I'm doing that again. You guys have, put in over 24 hours worth of astrological study. That's a lot. That's more than a lot of people can actually, account for. So in today's class, we're going to be talking about, there's going to be typos in here because we're talking about Neptune, and I had a very hard time this week getting myself together. So what's happened is every time that I've done a presentation, I have enacted what that planet actually does. I feel the effects heavily. And a lot of astrologers talk about this if they are planet worshiping. So if they choose a planet, they kind of assign it as a deity in their life, and they pray to it and they ask it questions and they kind of let things unfold for themselves. And that's kind of how I've allowed this course to come. And when we're talking about Neptune and Pisces and the 12th house, there is a lot of room, there needs to be room for mistake. There needs to be room for imperfection. So you see all this Virgo up here, but we're literally talking about Pisces. So I apologize for that. We're going to be talking about Pisces, Neptune, and the 12th house. So skip this here. So Pisces is a mutable sign and it's a water sign. So it is, representing the element of water. Oh, there's a lot of typos in here. Okay, so just listen to me and don't pay attention to the presentation. So it's, the element of water, and water is connecting us to our intuition, our flow of life, our rhythm, and what we really want to foresee coming, because we can tap into those emotions and those feelings, and we want that to lead the way. And so with Pisces, there's this need to kind of bring everything together. It's the last water sign, so there's this overwhelming need to kind of bring things all together: the family, the friends, the community, the earth, the resources. If you think about the 12th house being the last house, it's the culmination of everything together. So Pisces, and its water element is vapor. It's bubbles. It's you can't really touch it. It's kind of this elusive, smoky kind of water substance. And it can also be attributed to the sea foam on top of a layer in the ocean. Um, as a mutable sign, it's flexing, it's changing, it's dealing with crisis and integrating with kind of the natural forces of life. When we're dealing with Pisces, we're dealing with things out of our control. So this mutability kind of allows for, I know things are going to change. I know I'm not going to be perfect. I know there's going to be mistakes. And let's just go with the flow. I hope, there's this level of, I want people to accept me, all of me, all of the complexities that brings a person to who they are. And as the symbol of two fish, one fish above the water and one fish below, it's the representation that a person is in both worlds. They're in this world of, if you think about a fish out of water, they can't breathe, right? That's not their normal environment. And there is, but there's this, if you're above the water, you can see all of this beautiful nature that's going on outside of you. You don't realize, oh my gosh, I'm a fish and I'm wet, while being out of water. But being in the water, being in the current, being with the flow of, the other fish and, the way the current takes you, and feeling embodied, feeling yourself, feeling like you're part of the collective. So this Piscean energy is being able to be in both at the same time, to feel like, oh, this isn't the right place for me, to feel like, I'm a fish out of water. I was born in the wrong place. I was born in the wrong body. But then also having this overwhelming sense of wanting to be in the stream of everyone else, in the stream of life, and feeling connected and feeling at one and at peace. And so for Piscean people, this is very important for them to look for and to feel embodied with, is this flow. Where can they find their natural selves? What environment? So the mutability of this Piscean sign, it, these signs, this sign in particular, has a level of fear that is almost non-existent for certain things, because there is this natural inclination of trust and, kind of feeling like, I got to go with the flow of life and figure things out. That there is with Pisces, a need to, not take things personal and to kind of let things go. So, you know, with mutable signs, with air signs, you can kind of tell these people things, that things can kind of change quite often, and they will be able to go with that in a very healthy way. For Piscean people, it actually might be more difficult for them for some situations and not for the other. It's basically half and half. Like, you can think about the fish above water and the fish below water. There's still a level of needing to find that balance. Virgo, interjects that balance in some way or another. But Pisces is really trying not to control the situation so that they can move around, so that they can, experience a little bit more of the spiritual life. And we're going to talk heavily about the spiritual life because this is the spiritual archetype of the chart. So again, Pisces is water. It's thinking about others. It's thinking about, how can I be in close proximity to things that are natural to me, to things that make me feel like I belong, I'm embodied, I should be here on this earth. That is a big factor. Um, you know, I would say that this archetype, Pisces, is not as emotional as the other two signs in the way that people would assume. So, you can actually say things to a Pisces and their face might not change and they may seem okay. Um, but it still does affect them, and it affects them in different ways, and they might get a little self-conscious. So it's always nice to check in with them, because they just kind of have this ability to kind of let things roll off. And maybe it's really not a big deal, but this archetype tends to not get paid attention to enough. They tend to not get the attention that they desire. The close proximity and the interconnectedness that they're wanting to feel is so intense, that they often don't get that need fully met. And so I think, just in my observation of even my Pisces grandson, just having to realize that, he doesn't actually take things too personal. He can hear no with not a problem, but he's still an emotional being. I mean, I was crying the other day because I had found some things that I thought that I had thrown away. Some Christmas ornaments. I was thinking about my grandmother, and I was elated. And all of a sudden, he just starts crying. He was wailing. And I just thought, oh my gosh, so I calmed him down a little bit. I asked him, are you sad for me? Do you feel sad? And he goes, yes, I feel sad. And I said, baby, I'm not sad. I'm actually so happy that I'm kind of reconnected with this stuff that I don't know how to express any other emotion but this. And then he calmed down. And then that made me realize that Pisces feels everything in the room. They feel what other people are feeling, even if that feeling might not be right. You know, they on the outside, on the surface, they see that there's an emotional connection, and they want to be there with you. They want to sympathize and empathize with you. Um, and that's just part of their nature. And they can be very gifted and talented in being able to read the room, being able to intuit emotions of others, um, just like Cancer and Scorpio. But with Pisces, it's quite different. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So we're going to talk about the what and the how and the where through the natural polarity first. So we've been talking about Pisces. We've been talking about, there's a level of compassion that exists within Pisces that, they're wanting for everybody to feel a high level of peace and being settled in one's body. And I use the word embodied a lot when we talk about the 12th house, going into the first house. The 12th house is, a place where, a lot of people think, oh, well, astrologers say that's the house of prison. That's the house of, um, and self-undoing. And, all of these really, encapsulated words where one would feel isolated, encapsulated. But what I think they're trying to bring to the forefront is how Pisces, 12th house, and Neptune reminds us of the womb of our mother, where things were taken care of for us, where we didn't need to think or eat or breathe. We were just being. We were at one with our mother. We ate everything she did. We touched everything she did. We were completely in there. And when mom, gives birth and we leave her body, there's this sense of, oh, I'm all alone. I'm now an embodied person by myself. And so, there's this thing with Pisces and this archetype of, do I want to be here or not? Do I like where I am? Do I like being in my body? Um, so, Piscean people can have a hard time in these bodies. They can be very nervous. And have a hard time letting go of control, being feelings of being inundated. That's why Pisces represents the immune system, because after being inundated with things over time, we kind of build ourselves up and are able to put up a wall of defense with that Mars and going into the first house. But it's the parasympathetic nervous system, it's the lymphatic system. And so, it's our body's response to the stress that's in our lives and the things that we can't plan for. And so, if you think about that as the archetype and that being born as a person, this could be very uncomfortable until they figure out what feels comfortable for them and how to embody themselves and really feel good in the body. And that's why they're opposite of Virgo. If you do research on Virgo, you will find that Virgoan people are very much embodied, very much in their body, know exactly what's happening, can feel the smallest twinges. Virgo represents the sympathetic nervous system and the immune system with Pisces. So, it's literally our body's response to stress, and what we put on it work-wise. Virgo is representative of, just having this polished and refined and manicured life. And opposite of that is not. And that's that Piscean archetype. So there is this level of adaptation. We're dealing with this with the nodal axis right now. We're dealing with these energies of Pisces and Virgo, we're talking about our nervous systems a lot. And, whether we feel dysregulated or do we feel even, a lot of people are having to take adaptogens so they can just adapt to all the stresses in life. Um, and, really having to go into the deeper details of the health, the things that we may overlook. So I've been, really trying to make sure that I'm doing my lymphatic massage. There's all these organs and things that are pushing through and trying to create flow in our bodies so that we are more even, and they can get stagnant. And so if we're paying attention to these systems for the rest of the nodal change, and we'll be experiencing it through next June. So if your mind is in this frame of really trying to get into a better bodied state, it's a good time, So, we'll talk about different practices, but this is why spirituality is in this axis right here. This is why our spiritual practices are so important, our daily journaling, our meditation, that all belongs in here. Okay. So, Neptune, we talked, is about a little while ago. It's a generational planet. It encompasses a collective experience between generations. I'll give you the chart here in a couple minutes of the breakdown again of all of the generations, but I'm sure you've all written that down. It's how we're collectively illusioned and disillusioned. So Neptune is the film industry in particular, and so when we are looking at film and the way that we're influenced through TV, we'll always see that through Neptune. Um, Neptune is what I would consider a planet of consciousness. Um, you have to go through certain things in life in order to reach a different kind of understanding. And that usually comes at high expense. It's where we lose things, and things are just not projected to be the way that we planned. Um, and so, in saying that, when we get the opportunity to rise above that, there is a development of consciousness that happens, a sharpening that happens. And that's because Neptune is opposite Mercury. Mercury is the planet of strategy and planning and kind of having all of your ducks in a row. And that's against Neptune. And Neptune says there's no control here. This is all natural. This is, where your Neptune placement is, or what's in your 12th house, is generally what you are a natural at, what you don't have to try at. And we can talk about that personally if you'd like, but Mercury is bringing more function, organization, and preparation, where Neptune is just like, hey, leave that alone and go with the flow of things for a little while. Let things be chaotic so that you can hear the message of the universe, of God, of spirit, whatever that is for you. It's more of that conversation than the Virgo part of the Mercury. That's what we're focusing on with the North Node as well, is more the Neptune, less the Mercury. Well, it's both. Let me say it's both. But the focus is less on, you know, all of the details and more about, you know, um, what feels good to you. Okay. So the sixth house is, our daily lives, the mundane part of the world. Um, People say that it's like the house of career, it's your house of work. I'd say too that it's also a place where how you cooperate with others when you're in a space where you have to work together. It's the house of self-care and, where we're routine and controlled. So if we're thinking about that and the opposite of that, and we're looking at the 12th house and we think, oh gosh, when we get to the 12th house, there's going to be less functionality in my daily life. Um, there's going to be times where I'm overlooking my self-care. and I'm overlooking parts of my health that are important in the 12th house. So the 12th house kind of wakes us up to the things that we've kind of not been paying attention to, um, the things and the messages that, have been pushing. And maybe one day we're able to go, oh, that's what that means. That pain in my chest means, if I don't stop doing what I'm doing, I'm going to have a heart attack. And so I've got to change my habits. So the 12th house brings that. It eventually brings someone to function, but only by way of showing that, hey, not everything is as you're planning it. You're finding yourself under attack, you're getting sick, you're not taking your supplements, you're not going to bed at a good time anymore. You're inundating yourself with, all of these things that are not personal to you. So you're not able to take care of yourself. And so the 12th house makes someone go, oh, I've got to isolate and take care. I've got to remove myself from a situation, cut myself off from, all of these things that are draining my energy. So, the 12th house does represent an area where, we're going to have to cut things off in order to build our spiritual energy and our energetic capacities to be with other people. I know you know what I mean when it's like, you go to a space and there's a lot of people and there's a lot of things going on, but just kind of based on what's happening, you can feel the energy in the room, whether it's going to drain you or enliven you. Um, and so, if you've got transits in the 12th house, larger transits like Jupiter, Saturn, and the other outer planets, can really make this feel like a thing that you're, really having to focus on, maybe for a year or more. So let's see here. I'll go through Neptune through the houses here in a minute. Um, let's see here, actually. Let's do this. Here we go. So this is Neptune through the signs. No, this is, yes, okay. So Neptune and Pluto, remember we talked about that during our 8-week, at our 8-week mark. We were talking about how these planets together are in orbit. And they both represent the generations that we call baby boomers, the Gen X, the millennials. And so these are the years that we're looking at when Neptune is in Sagittarius, then Pluto is in Libra, and then that will define the Gen X population. And so I just wanted to put that up here for you just in case. And I will talk about Neptune through the houses. So if you have Neptune in the first house, then, Neptune has this energy of Mars. It has this energy of, being born, regenerating oneself. Neptune is in Aries right now. For the first time in our lived experience, we are seeing Neptune in Aries. Or, if someone has Neptune in the first house, they are, likely trying their best to go their own way, and to, learn to be in a new frame of reference. So, with Neptune in Pisces, there is this level of kind of blending everything together and everything is mixed and, you can't tell the difference between the two. But when Neptune is in Aries, there's this high level of separatism. And I think we're seeing it now where, we're seeing the escalation of racism. We're seeing the escalation of you're black, you're white, you're Asian, you're all of these delineations. So when Neptune is in the first house, there's this vast awareness of difference. But potentially not feeling like they can fit in and having to leave over and over again in order to find that right space where they feel that they're able to be their natural selves and they're not having to fight and defend themselves so often. So Neptune in the first house is kind of a defensive placement. It is a placement of needing to take life into our own hands, or needing to take health into our own hands, the regulation of our life into our own hands. Um, so, that's a pretty important thing. Um, when Neptune is in the second house or is in Taurus, um, you know, when it comes to going with the flow of things, we're coming out of being in this Aryan energy of survival mode into more of this energy of, okay, relaxing into things. Now I'm going to gather my resources and to be very aware of monetary status and where my next meal is going to come from. So with Neptune in the second house, or in relationship to Taurus, there can be a level of feeling insecure with food, or providing food to others, being a Mother Teresa of sorts, being someone who is extremely giving in that way. When it comes to, Neptune, offering, a sense of otherworldly spiritual connections, with it being in the second house, a person would be able to embody this very well. Someone might be very inclined to, the healing arts, the massage therapy, the sound therapy and things like this, the healers of the earth, the things that we use that are natural, that will bring us comfort and make us feel better in our bodies, is the placement here. When Neptune is in the third house, we're dealing with communication, we're dealing with education. So if Neptune is here, then, a person is most definitely going to focus on and have kind of a natural affinity for speaking in a particular way, being able to catch things or hear things that people are saying. And we've got some people that we're going to look at who have similar signature with this Neptune in the third house, and the ability to just to be able to listen, to be able to hear, could be fast learners or possibly not. Could feel like a fish out of water at school. Could feel like when communication is happening, that they don't fit in, that they're not able to find their way with it. So like the fish, the two separate fish of the Pisces, above and below, there are going to be some talents and gifts and natural abilities, and there will also be, the things that, make them feel like they're not with everybody else. Usually these are people that can, hear music very well, very maybe musically inclined, poetically inclined, and, really potentially one day, a great teacher or a lecturer of some sort. Um, you know, my mentor believes that Neptune represents career in the chart, because it is the natural inclination of a person. When you see Neptune in a particular sign, there's something really that this person is able to bring to the masses. They're able to do that in a particular way, depending on what house it's in. So if Neptune is in the fourth house, there is this deep need or deep want to, have a close connection to family, to have a connection to a home. So maybe these people maybe grew up with home insecurity or insecurity around feeling connected to their mothers or their family. And so they may go out to seek that. They may, really actually be fully immersed in their family and can't really separate themselves from it and kind of take on things that don't belong to them just because they're family. And so people with these signatures can, oftentimes feel like they don't have an out, that they can't leave. They don't have any other options. Family is what family is. But these people might actually be, the therapists of the family. They might be the people, the confidant that people come to. They'll be very keen on noticing when there are unhealthy dynamics, when there are unhealthy emotional attachments, um, because they've been inundated with it so much. So Neptune in the fourth house is being very, very sensitive to other people's needs. I've met, a couple people with displacement, even with the moon there, and their level of connection with people needs to be based around truth, first of all. You can't lie to these people with Neptune in the fourth house. And, once you get together, you're family. Now we'll never be separate. So there's kind of a tug and pull with this kind of placement that sometimes they don't get that familial connection they need, or feel deflated when, they lose a family member, or, someone they thought was a friend or a family member isn't. Um, so that's a placement there. Um, when we're dealing with, career dynamics, this could be a person who is very emotionally intelligent. So they might lead groups of people that, are navigating emotional turmoil. They're dealing with learning how to be in a safe space with other people, learning how to ask for safety. Um, so that's another thing there. When you have Neptune in the fifth house or Leo signatures, there is a large energy that kind of makes this person very playful and very geared towards, um, understanding how to fully be themselves. So, with Neptune in the fifth house, they can be quite playful and creative, but not know how to channel that, or are still trying to figure out how to channel that. And so they can actually maybe be savants in a way, when it comes to having that fifth house signature, of, being able to, hear the flow, hear the messages of the cosmos. Like, oh, I was told to create this. I had a dream that I was supposed to make this. And so these people can be led by their creativity. They can maybe hear God, through that. Um, when it comes to childhood and things like that, maybe these people might have not had such a great childhood, or maybe they did. But there could be some disillusionment around this childhood, disillusionment about, the way that one was treated. And so, when transits come around for them, they're, kind of reminded about, how things weren't perfect. But, they got themselves through, and when things are rough, they create, they make. And so these people might be very drawn to theater and acting and expressing oneself fully and naturally, because, what else are you going to do with that kind of placement? You've got to do something well. And so, yeah, this placement is definitely could deal with children, could influence children, or influence the masses in that way, by, kind of that childlike expression. So with Neptune in the sixth house, or Neptune in Virgo, there is a strong need to get things right. And right in the way of making sure that things are planned out, making sure that you are doing things by the book. Um, and there's a high level of perfection that lifts when Neptune is here. Um, there's always being able to see where the dissatisfaction lies, being able to see where the imperfection is, the with things that are not aesthetically pleasing about a thing. Um, when Neptune is in the sixth house, someone needs to know that spirituality needs to be a part of their daily life every single day, because that's what helps someone deal with what happens when we, kind of beat ourselves up about not being perfect or not doing the right things at the right time, or maybe missing an opportunity, or like I have made so many mistakes in this presentation, and I have Neptune in the sixth house. And so fundamentally, I have to be okay with making mistakes, and for me to not think that people are judging me, which is a hard thing. With Neptune in the sixth house, you are aware that what you do affects other people, and so you very much want to make sure that it is done correctly. Um, with Neptune here, in order to regulate the nervous system or make the nervous system feel calm and easy, um, physical exercise is needed daily. The physical exercise becomes the spiritual practice, basically. Um, and with Neptune in the sixth house, cooperation with others and wanting to make things fair and balanced and peaceful in the workplace, Neptune is good in this sixth house. So if you're wanting someone who knows how to kind of smooth things over so everybody can continue working well, that's a good Neptune placement. So you've got Neptune in the seventh house, or Neptune in Libra. There is, a big need to understand where we are in relationship to others. And there might be this big need to um, make sure that we are experiencing unending relationship, just relationship after relationship, um, or the experience of not ever having a relationship and needing it and wanting it and looking to find ways of attracting it. With Neptune in this placement, they could have, a sense of style, really know how to dress, really know what other people are wanting to hear and see, what they're looking to buy. So this is a very commerce-centered placement. Um, with Neptune in the seventh house, like I said, there can be a disillusionment or a truth that's not been uncovered when it comes to relationship dynamics with having Neptune in the seventh. So um, it can be difficult when there's transits, happening there, because you know things can be going really great for a long time, and then maybe Jupiter or Saturn crosses over that Neptune placement in the seventh house, and oh, my partner cheated on me, or oh, I'm done with this partner. They actually get on my nerves. So there's this bubble bursting happening with Neptune, um, and especially with Jupiter as well. And Jupiter is the natural, the old time ruler of Pisces. So they kind of have similarities in that way of bursting the bubble, of going too far and reaching the edge and then kind of being disappointed. Um, with Neptune in the seventh house, there is this need to go out and find, spiritual tchotchkes. And, these are the people who wear the spiritual garb. They wear the malas, and, they are ones who are, kind of making sure that everybody knows that God follows them. Um, they are most definitely going to influence people by way of style and by way of value. valuing oneself. We'll see that in some of the other charts, but when Neptune, seventh house, Libra are involved, we are dealing with how we feel about ourselves, our self-worth, and our self-value, but how we provide that to the world and how the world responds to that. So Neptune is kind of large here. So if we've got Neptune in the eighth house or in Scorpio, we're definitely dealing with different sexual dynamics than we would experience with any of the other signs. So if we think about the sexual revolution of the mid 70s, that's when Neptune and Scorpio cropped up, when there was the free love movement, when there was a sense of sexual freedom, going with the flow, connecting with other partners of different races. That was a huge boom in biracial children, people of different ethnicities coming together. Um, with Neptune and Scorpio, there is a deep need to make sure that you're embodied sexually, to make sure that you um, are aware of your own power, and that you know what that power is. You're not eluded by what that power could be. So if Neptune is in the eighth house, you know, um, I've seen these people actually be very, very attuned to what they're able to earn. So they're actually very high earners, can be, um, and are very meticulous about the comings and goings of their money, very um, skeptical, and wanting to make sure that all of the documents are in a row, because the eighth house is taxes too. So if Neptune is in the eighth house, this person is probably needing to, um, if they're wanting to make more money, if they're wanting to um, make their eighth house work better for them, um, they need to make sure that their taxes are done right, that they're paying the right amount, that they've got someone in their corner that's going to make sure that they can hold on to things. So with Neptune in Scorpio, there's this need to hold on to something, to make it available for longer periods of time. Um, even during this time, this was a big time when Osho was out and about, and people were doing these dynamic yoga practices um, that involved people sleeping with other people's partners, and in crowded rooms, and in the name of spirituality. And so this is a very dynamic placement, because these people are looking to come to peace with themselves, and come to peace with their bodies, and come to peace with their money, to come to peace with their own power. Neptune always wants to bring peace wherever it is. So if Neptune is in the ninth house, or in relationship to Sagittarius, then this is the generation of going out and charting a new path for themselves. This is the generation where mom and dad were just gone and doing their own thing, where they left their young children at 6 and 7 to fend for themselves, and to figure out how to live a life where parents are gone. Um, you have to teach yourself. You have to get yourself around the city safely. You have to figure out the right people to talk to, so that you can find the right group, the right beliefs, so that you can stay safe. So, this is the generation, or, the placement where, it's almost as if everybody believes that they know everything already, so that they'll be fine, you know. And intrinsically they are, but that doesn't mean that they don't need instruction, that they don't need guidance or mentorship. So with this Neptune in the ninth house, there's a strong need to have someone who can be a mentor, who can be a guide, who can be a pseudo parent, a grandparent, is usually a great place to go to with this placement, because grandparents always can kind of step in when mom and dad aren't doing the right thing. Um, so this placement does denote strong grandparents and those people stepping in. This placement also represents, you know, going your own way in such an authentic way that it kind of breaks the barriers of what previous generations or previous generations have done, which is like, you know, yeah, you can go to college, but you know, why waste all that time? Why can I just go to like technical school? Can't I just learn something that's more specialized and not waste my time and kind of just get down to, what's true? And so there's that. This is a generation that really broke the mold when it came to they went to college, they did the traditional things, but a lot of them didn't. A lot of them, you know, didn't go to college right after high school. They traveled the world. This was the first generation that did that, put their self and their personal needs before education. And that was scary for a lot of people. It can be scary for any mother or anybody to watch somebody not do, the regimented things that you would do to get the things that are promised. But with Neptune in the ninth house or Neptune in Sagittarius, um, there are no particular steps. The steps are being made by you. They're being laid by you, by way of experiences, by way of going to different cities and towns and countries, and living the vagabond life, living that gypsy life, being that student, being the traveler. Um, so yeah, I could talk for days on Neptune and Sagittarius. I love you guys. Okay, so Neptune in the 10th house or Neptune in Capricorn. So this is you know, the the experience of someone who is really looking for people who look like really great leaders, because to them, what they're experiencing, having Neptune in the 10th house, is that their leaders and the people that they are supposed to look up to do not have any moral compass, that they are not living up to what today's societal standards would say is a good life, is a peaceful life. And so these people are, coming into this life really looking for um, people who can guide them. Again, still mentorship in a way, but they're more so looking for people who are in government, people who are, high management, people who are running things, because they are wanting to do things the right way. They're wanting to very much do right by people because they realize that they have not, had things, done the right way for them. With Neptune and Capricorn, these people can be very, you know, these are the millennials, these are the people that were promised a particular way of life. You go to school, you follow the rules, you'll get a good paying job, you'll get pensions, you'll get retirement. And that has been illusion. That has been something that Neptune and Capricorn people have had to really come to grips with. That the way that I live my life is going to be markedly different than all of the rest of the generations, because what's promised isn't actually what's available anymore. And so there's still this need of like looking for people who seem right in the world, and who are doing right by others. And so you can imagine that all the millennials are turning right now, watching the level of dysfunction that's happening in the White House. And even in other countries, some of them are having a different experience where they're finally experiencing, liberation, and seeing women come to rise, and they're finally getting the experience of peace when it comes to leadership. Whereas here in America, our experience is finally starting to break down. And this peaceful thing that we thought we were going to get, this peaceful leadership or government, um, it may not be there. And so what do? We have to become that. So with Neptune in the 10th house, this person, because they're searching for it, they're looking for it, it's not really being seen. They just keep being disappointed. They then become it. They then try their best to fit the mold. So if you've been inundated with this really dysfunctional way of leading people, eventually you learn the function of how to lead. And so this can be a natural ability for people having Neptune in the 10th house or Neptune in Capricorn. They can have just some way that they really stand out to help the society or societal needs in some particular way. So if Neptune is in the 11th house or Aquarius, um, these are the generation of people who have been raised by the tablet. They don't have any recollection of life without technology. Um, Now, they might be very technologically literate, having Neptune in the 11th house or Neptune in Aquarius, or say even Neptune conjunct Uranus. This will be the same signature of, you know, really needing to understand how to advance one's life and to become closer in community by way of technology. And Aquarius represents technology. Um, the 11th house will represent, our computers, our networks, our Wi-Fi. And so this is the generation that really doesn't know what it's like to live without the information age, to live without this higher minded thing of you can just go on to Google or use AI in order to figure out life's problems. This is the Gen Z generation. They are watching their parents and they are finding that there's not a lot of hope for them. This is, you know, um, collectively, they are feeling as if, there's not the same promises that were given to the millennials and the ones previous. And so they're really trying to figure out how it will work for them because things have been so disrupted. The education has been disrupted due to the pandemic. Um, and their level of connection and being in groups, because we're talking about Aquarius, has been completely dismantled. These are the people of our generation that have had less human communication than the previous generations. They're the generations that are having the less sex. They're, not getting together in groups. They're not partying. They're not clubbing. Whereas the rest of us have had an intimate connection with these things because the internet and our phones weren't the things that kind of kept our attention. So we had to find that elsewhere. And so, when you have Neptune in the 11th house, um, there is a deep need to make sure that, you are being with and around like minds, that you are getting physical connection, that it's not just this mental connection or through the frequency waves of the internet. Um, these are people who are likely going to create some of the most profound connective groups that we'll see, because they are the most affected when it comes to humanity and our connection to one another. It's skeptical. It's they've been disappointed a lot, pulled out of school, not able to graduate, didn't go to prom, you know, or not even just being believed. This is the generation who, um, they have these different higher minded perspectives, but if they're not around conscious people, um, then they don't get those ideas out, and they don't get the opportunity to express themselves um, in this really big way that kind of brings people together, that kind of fights for things that other people aren't getting in their lives. So it's a powerful placement, Neptune in the 11th. And lastly, Neptune in the 12th house. With this placement, you know, Neptune in the 12th house or Neptune in Pisces, we just had that experience for the past 15 years where, for the most part, things were relatively calm. There was kind of a lot of jolting around initially. And then as we started to get to Neptune in Aries, things started to really feel like turbulence. So we came out of this peaceful era of, everything will turn out. Everything usually turns out fine. Don't worry about it. Go with the flow. Um, and as we're seeing now, that's not really the case. That at some point we have to stand up and fight. So with this Neptune in the 12th house or Neptune in Pisces, we're no longer standing around waiting for someone to fix our problems or to come in and save the day. We have to be those kinds of people with Neptune in the 12th. We have to wake up and realize that people have been lying. People are distrustful. And if we remember, even just the past 5 years, we've learned so much about our government. We've learned so much about other people's intentions and what they've done. If you don't go out and vote, look what happens. Um, so there's been a lot of us realizing where we've slept on things, and where we need to stand up and fight. So with Neptune in the 12th house, these people are learning how to stick up for themselves and to not be inundated by other people's BS, and for them to understand that they're able to take their lives into their own hands. And they might empower people in that way, as they kind of reach that stage. So Neptune is usually a place where we are kind of shielded, where we're not really aware, we kind of have our blinders on. And then over time, life will continue to show us that, okay, got to take those blinders down. Okay, you got to open your eyes, got to wake up. And then over time, it's just like, oh wow, I'm really good at this now. I'm really aware of this now because I've just been continuously shown that, there's pieces of the puzzle missing. Okay, there we go. Neptune through the houses. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm gonna go back to, here we go. So we're talking about Venus, we're talking about Neptune. We talked about how the chart today, even Venus and Neptune are conjunct. This would mean something too. You could consider Venus and Neptune as a chart dynamic if they're in any aspect to each other. So if Venus and Neptune are opposite each other, if they're sextile each other, then they're going to have that similar influence of, bringing values together, being compassionate for one another, kind of realizing where things need to be corrected. So with Venus, from the Libra perspective, we're thinking about our relationships and our resources, being resourceful to one another. And, we're like, hey, it's not just me in this world. I've got to value other people. I've got to include other people into my life. Makes things more fun. Venus brings, balance and fairness. It brings the sweetness of life. It brings diversity and difference, needing to see the opposite in order to, have a relation to who they are. You know, if I see something other than me, then I'm able to identify where I'm at. If everybody's the same, then I can't really identify myself. So that's where Venus and Libra brings that diversity or difference. And with Neptune, Neptune is, wanting to bring everything together. So diversity really isn't as important. At the end of the day, we're all humans. And so that's what Neptune is trying to get us to realize is that, at the end of the day, we're all one, you know, that we with Neptune, we are trying to let nature run its course. So, you know, they kind of have the same vibration in kind of allowing things to come to you, allowing people to come to you, you going out to seek other people. Um, there's this kind of like ebb and flow between these two planets, and their level of balance and peace in terms of what they're trying to bring. Um, so with Neptune, there's it's the planet of purification. It's, restoring oneself and kind of giving some isolation. And Venus is nurturing the self and feeding oneself and giving the pleasures of life to oneself, in a maybe a consumerist way, or maybe not. It could be completely natural, to not, buy a new dress to make oneself happy, or to just, make a meal out of the things that were grown in the garden. That could be enough. But the point is that both of these planets are trying to bring um, a level of happiness and contentment, a level of satisfaction and happiness. Um, and that's why they are octaves of each other, just like we would consider in the music world. So, our first influential person is Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin is the co-founder of Def Jam Records. He's not a trained musician, and he doesn't read sheet music, which is not a common thing for a lot of musicians these days anyways. Those of us that can read it, I mean, big deal. um, he approaches music from an emotional and intuitive perspective. Um, and so he's been called the vibe curator. He's very minimalist, and believes in less distractions, the better. Um, so when we look at his birth chart, we see that he has the sun in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces. So this sun, Jupiter together in this very spiritual sign, very intuitive because we're dealing with water. Um, he is creating this vibe. He is approaching things from emotions and intuition, and less distortion, less words. He is a person that's been explained to remove things to its rawest form. So removing a lot of the beats and instrumentals and making the vocals stand out a lot more. So, in that way, when we talk about purification or bringing things down to its natural state, that's what this archetype is doing. It is trying to bring someone to the very core essence of who they are when they're not trying to be somebody else. And so people really state that when they work with him, that they really figure out who they are as an artist. Um, in the final months of Johnny Cash's life, Rubin participated in daily communion rituals with the singer, despite not having been a Christian. So they would perform this ritual together even when they were apart, and with Rubin visualizing the elements as Cash guided him through the ceremony. The practice had a profound impact on Rubin, deepening his appreciation for spiritual rituals and their role for human connection. So through the last couple years of Johnny Cash's life, Rick Rubin went through and remastered a lot of his older hits, and he blew up again for a little while before he passed away. And they became great friends. And so, he's born on a full moon. This is a full moon guy. So, when it comes to the details of life and, having this intimate connection with spirituality, needing things to be very minimal and simple in order to hear the natural parts of what makes things beautiful, um, is what this Virgo is trying to do as well, through the Pluto and the Uranus here. So, he's able to really, he has a keen awareness for detail. Um, when things are missing, when things need to be inserted, he's the guy. Um, he's got Mercury and Chiron in Pisces. So, at a certain level, this gentleman probably feels like anything is possible. That anybody can find their voice, that anybody can find their way and be a star, as long as the right person has given the attention that's needed. Um, and so I don't know what his personal life was as a child, but I do know how people speak of him today. He's Rick the Ruler. He is, highly sought after in terms of a producer. Um, and, he has this higher minded perspective with Venus and Saturn in Aquarius. He's able to use technology to its highest degree, in order to really advance the careers of these people who do things a little different. So, the people that he's guided in his life have a different sound. They're just different people altogether. Um, and we'll talk about some other little moments here. But again, he's a Neptune in Scorpio. So he was born in that time of free love and free spirituality, and let's find another way to be connected. Um, and he found his way. Now, Russell Simmons is the other co-founder of Def Jam Records. And just so happens, Russell is a Libra. So we're dealing with a Venus and we're dealing with a Neptune. The Venus and the Neptune got together and they created Def Jam Records, right? So they're both Sun Jupiter. So they're both able to hear the talents and the skills of other people and bring that to the forefront, to actually bring it to market, put it on a CD and sell it. So just a few things about Russell. He was involved in gang activities when he was young. He joined a local game called the Seven Immortals. He began selling marijuana while he was in middle school. So he kind of had like a troubled youth, moving around Queens. And, over time, he, as most people do, figure things out. He went to college. Um, he ran into Rick Rubin eventually, but you know, he ended up being this very high profile, like fashion mogul almost, because he had his hands in some different things like baby fat and some different clothing lines. Um, he it seems as if anything that he likes, he has to bring it to market. He has to bring it so that other people can buy it. And there is that Libra quality of, I've figured something out for myself that's valuable for me, and so let me bring that to other people. Let me make sure that they understand that that's a value, could be a value for them too. Um, so he, like Rick, is able to um, you know, really bring people into the fold and hype them up and expand their range, expand their voice, um, and leave a lasting imprint on the world. So his contributions to fashion, but he also, has been a big avid vegan. He studies and practices Jivamukti yoga. And so he, like Rick, has a very spiritual life. Um, Rick doesn't actually wear it, but Russell will. He'll wear his malas. He'll turn his spirituality into a clothing line and kind of make it so everybody can access it. Whereas Rick just wears a t-shirt and jeans and he walks barefoot. Um, so differences in the two, even though they're both doing something of similar value. So the both of them together met in 1984, and they both had something different to bring to the table. So, Ruben brought this raw, aggressive sound from his punk influences, where Simmons brought his deep roots from hip hop and managing acts like Run DMC and Curtis Blow together. So, you know, Russell was kind of, the black side, and, Ruben was part of the white side, and when they came together, it didn't matter. It was Def Jam. Everybody gets to be here. Everybody's an artist. Doesn't matter if you're black and white, you should be heard. And that Venus Neptune that they brought together was really beautiful because, we got the Beastie Boys and we got Run DMC and LL Cool J and, really Public Enemy, all of these really boisterous 80s, bands that came out and kind of changed the way that we viewed vocals, the way that we viewed, how much music gets put into a track, how much vocals do we actually hear. The lyrics got raw, during this time. And so Def Jam became kind of this blueprint for hip hop entrepreneurship for other brands. Um, their early togetherness of being friends and figuring this thing out together was pivotal in the music industry, because it united, both cultures together, um, in a way that changed the industry forever. Um, so eventually they had creative disagreements as people will. Um, and Rubin left 1988, Def Jam, and started his own American Recordings a couple years later. And Def Jam is still being run by Russell. Um, but I think the point is that, these people had very similar signatures. They were both Sun Jupiter, and they're both dealing with these Venus Neptune um, connections of getting together, overindulging with one another, really being in the flow and in the current. And then when things get corporate, when things get controlling, Rick's like, I'm out of here because I don't do control, I don't do corporate, and I don't do shoes. So, very interesting that they were able to come together with this. And I just continued to hear Rick interview, the stars of today in the music industry. And he's just a very calm and collected guy. He really doesn't need for much. He doesn't ask a whole lot. Um, and yeah, he's a pretty interesting character. So, Venus from the Taurus aspect, Venus from the Libra aspect will equal Neptune. When we have a good personal life, when we're resourced and fed, when we are considering our pleasure and our happiness, uh, and then we get to Libra and we get to have a relationship or, be friends with someone or just have deep connections with other people besides just ourselves. And then Neptune starts to go, oh, this is peace. This is happiness. This is ultimate happiness. When I'm able to care for myself, I'm able to care for other people, they're able to care for me. It just kind of all kind of blends together in a way. So Venus is receiving, it's opening the senses that are outside of you, and going out to see what the market has, what the vendors say that you should buy. It's quantifying Venus. It has needs, it has wants, and it can tell when it doesn't have the things that it's looking for. It makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel like you're not a valuable person, like you're not doing the right thing with yourself. And so there is this level of assessing a material value or a monetary value or even just a status value, to quantify, where you are in your life. And then again, Venus brings the balance, of fairness and equality, and bringing together people of difference. And then on the other side, Neptune, it's the generation planet. It moves a lot slower, 13 to 14 years in each sign, 165 years to make a full revolution. So, it's something that we're dealing with at a longer point of time. We get to see things that are dissatisfying to us all. We see them in the movie industry. We listen to these stories that are being told to us, that are shown on the big screen, and we look at ourselves and see if we can relate to that, in that Venus way. Um, Neptune opens our eyes and makes us see, hey, you've been sleeping on this, wake up. Or this needs to be cleaned up. You need to take your car in, get an oil change. Um, and sometimes can represent where we're lost and where we need to be found. So yeah. Now together, with Neptune and Venus, we're talking about you know satisfaction and happiness. But when we think about Neptune by itself, if we isolate it, it really stands for having some kind of faith or trust in something larger than ourselves. Because we can't have control over everything, um, it means that we need to believe in something or somebody, when there's no concrete evidence that something is going to go our way, we have to have like a confidence in a higher power, or a future outcome. So faith is really important, no matter what you believe, as long as it's positive, um, because it will keep you going during challenges and uncertain times or setbacks. Um, what we don't want to do is spiritual bypass, which is ignore those doubts or fears and just say, "Oh, well, God's got it." Um, but we do want to make sure that we have a level of trust, um, and it has to be there in some form or fashion. And Neptune is our natural life. It's dirt under the fingernails and walking barefoot in our gardens, and our unrefinedness, our imperfections, our snaggle teeth, and the hairs on our chin, and all the things that we look at ourselves and we think, that's not valuable. And Neptune says, it is. It's what makes you a human. It's your essential self, Neptune is kind of peeling back the layer of yourself. You come into this life under society structures and their norms and their rules, and it goes against everything we are as a human being, as a highly spiritual beings in this world. We have to peel off all of those things that have really kind of clouded us, so that we can get down to our essential nature. So, when you go through crisis, when your bubble is burst, when you feel disappointment, after a while you get to it. You start realizing, okay, what was clouding my judgment? What do I need to simplify or remove so that I can, get to who I really am. And so when you're working with Neptune, when you're paying attention to it, you are realizing, how you can be more genuine to you and how you can embody yourself in a way that's not only, empowering to you, but what the current of your generation also needs to feel. So we've got to really be there for ourselves, because in our own generational currents, we support one another, and we come together under this common thing that we've, common pain, common beauty, common, whatever the situation is in the generation, Um, it's like having a brother or sister, if you have brothers or sisters, usually they are the only people other than you that know what it's like to be raised with your parents, right? Um, so, when I speak to other millennials about living, it's much different than speaking to a Gen Xer because, the way that we were influenced and what we came in with was quite different in the way that we had to move. So there's that important note. We went over that. So I wanted to talk about Alexander McQueen. Almost a new moon in Pisces. He was a savant. So, we talk about Neptune, Pisces, the 12th house being very natural, something that you don't have to work hard at. You just kind of emanate it, right? So he began his fashion career at 16, and he was known for his impeccable tailoring, his impeccable cutting skills, like able to cut a garment within, the allotted, like almost to a T, was able to cut things perfectly. Um, he, would fashion things for Prince Charles and working at Anderson and Shepherd. So, you know, he's he comes into this life and he has this really talented gift of, he has all of this Libra, this South Node, Jupiter, Uranus. He knows fashion. He knows what people should be wearing. He knows people should wear things. And, he also had this very early um, effect on the fashion world. He affected the masses with what he thought was creatively beautiful. Um, so he succeeded someone else as a head designer at Givenchy. And, he was, was it in 2000? Gucci bought 51% stake in his own label so that he would have the time to focus on his own brand. People wanted to give him the things that he needed because he was so Venus Neptune. He had so much Pisces and so much Libra that really it really brought people to understand what he had of, people were able to see his value through and through. Um, and, he became known for these like hauntingly beautiful collections, theatrical shows, and emotional storytelling through fashion. I think that is really beautiful. This moon in Pisces um, really shows, this ability to, um, have everybody else feel this emotion, this collective emotional change off of what we're viewing, off of what we're being influenced off of in that moment in time. Um, but also, as some artists experience, when it's almost like we have, this meter for how big we can actually get, or how much of that we can actually experience before it starts to break us down. And, with these earlier childhood stars or people who are savants early in life, we watch the breakdown of their lives in front of our eyes a lot of times because there's only so much that we can hold something so large before, our ability starts to wane and we start to get sick and defective, for lack of better words. So just to explain, McQueen dealt with depression and anxiety, and it was exacerbated really bad when his mother died. And he actually took his life a couple days after his mom passed away. The separation from his mother was too much. Not having her to call because he was so close, because she was probably the only person who understood his weirdness, his gayness, his vision, and all of the new things that he wanted to bring into the world. Um, It's tragic, but he left behind a really big legacy of, pushing boundaries, celebrating, the big flamboyant parts of life, and that fashion could actually be an art. It could be a statement in life. So, he has Neptune in the ninth house in Scorpio. And so, he was very influential by way of, showing other people what you can be allowed to do, where you can take back your power, and what that could look like. He was a different sexual being, and was expressive about his husband and, being out with that. Um, and he left behind a huge legacy. People talk about him in rap songs still to this day, because they really loved the way that he told stories. I mean, he'd open up his home to all of his friends and family, and then they would have these storytelling situations, and people would dress up, and it was just this really closed environment where he was really able to feel himself and be himself and be in the art and in the flow of everything. But when the party ends, and you're left to your own devices, it can be lonely. And I'm sure that this was a hard life for him, being in that spotlight and having so many high moments of elation. That's such a young age. Um, you know, Eventually it catches up with us, and sometimes we're able to catch it. And unfortunately, he caught him first. So the last person is the Queen of Neo Soul, Erica Badu. She has influenced the masses on many different ways. This is her actual birth chart, with the date and time correct. So again, a new moon in Pisces. She has this very special gift of being able to use her voice in ways, in this really poetic, free-flowing way. It's got jazz and hip hop and R&B. It's introspective. There's lots of spiritual, quips in her music. She talks about being a Pisces all day long. Um, she frequently wears Afro-futuristic, tribal, or avant-garde looks and says that style is a form of intelligence. So, Libra, sometimes they can be really big on style, and this higher minded perspective of the fact that, style, or the way that we look, can be a higher minded or intelligent way that we're dealing with the world, is kind of interesting to say. She's got Mercury and the North Node in Aquarius. So, the way that she's moving in the world, she thinks that the way she does things is the right way. It's the right way to express because, for one, she is, a marginalized woman. She's a woman who, when she came out on the scene, she was one of the first ones to wear a turban and wear the ankh, and, um, to have this kind of spiritual, natural look to her. And she wasn't fitting the mold of, the industry at the time, and she never has gone in that way. She's always, forged her own way in that way. Um, so she's also been a muse for designers like Givenchy. So, we were just talking about Alexander McQueen. These Piscean people, they are elusive, they're otherworldly. There's something so magical about them. And so they draw people to them, and they are drawn, to certain situations that are for them. And so she eventually, over time, became a doula, and, helps brings babies into the world. And so with this Jupiter and Neptune on the ascendant, we can see that, she is there helping, bring new life into the world. She's there physically as new life is coming through. She's the teacher, as these babies are coming in, and she's helping mom breastfeed, and, remember who she is, and um, to feel like her natural self. She's got the South Node in Leo. That's, kind of uh, a dual thing that we're dealing with here, because, you know, Leo is in the ninth house of Sagittarius. And so she kind of has this way of making her mark on the world by making sure that babies come into this world healthy and safe, and, stripped from what the hospital would say is the way that, a woman should um, birth her child, and the way that she should feel in her body. Um, in the way that she should be treated. And so, as her career has progressed over the years, I've seen, her come out of the hospital and be in more of a midwifery experience, where they're outside of the hospital and they're in someone's home or backyard. And so there's this just very natural way of bringing life into the world. Um, she's known of doing things when spirit moves her to do it, not when the market demands. So, she's following the current. She is making sure that she is just who she is, and she knows that eventually people will follow. And that's why I like Erica. She's great. Um, yeah. All right. So we are at the end here. Do you all have any questions before I pull up Deborah's chart? She will be the last chart of our session. Do you feel
Yeah,
ready for?
I had a question about the series of Alexander McQueen.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about his series in relationship with his mom? Because when his mom died, he was so devastated.
Yeah. So I don't know how I didn't do a ton of research on, what he has said about his mother, and his feelings of such. But, when we look at this Sun on First chart, we are seeing that, the house of mom, the fourth house, is in Cancer. And so the moon is what's highlighting this placement. And so if we look at the moon, we see the moon in the 12th house. There's this cosmic, this womb. Mom took care of everything when he was in the belly. Mom made sure he was fed. Um, Mom made sure he was protected, and he didn't have to worry about whether he fit in or whatever, because mom was regulating his nervous system, and making sure everything came to fruition. Now, you know, some souls, when they're born, um, they don't want to leave mom's body. There's a big level of confusion as to why they have to be separated from mom. So with this moon in this 12th house, there could be this sense of like never wanting to be away from her. Probably was a clingy young man who loved to ask questions, and, asked a lot about otherworldly things. She probably delighted him in all of the things that he needed. Um, and, I say that because, you know, for someone who would feel as devastated enough to take their life after mom leaves means to me that um, he had a very deep attachment to her, and could be, considered unhealthy, because nobody wants to see that happen to an individual. No mother wants to leave this earth and worry that their child's not going to be able to survive without them. That's a mother's worst fear. Um, and having such a chaotic life, being so talented at a young age, um, and being 16 when you're first starting this out, he left the roost early. There wasn't a whole lot of time for incubation. He needed to get up and go because he's just very talented, and everybody needed what he had. And I'm sure there was lots of long phone phone calls through the night, and him being smashed, and needing her guidance. And he probably leaned on her quite a bit. When there is a strong Pisces signature, um, and there is a closeness with mom there or grandma. um, it's almost like they just can't physically be away from them. So you know he has a lot of planets on the nodes. So when we think of um, the nodes of the moon are what in evolutionary astrology we consider the past life and the present. And when there are planets near that, we consider that that is a signature of being here before, of having gone through this experience before. So if we're looking at his south node in Libra with Jupiter right there, it would denote that, oh man, of course he was brilliant when he was a young man. He's been here before. He's been in the fashion world before. He knows clothes. He knows aesthetic. And Uranus is there too. This is, a higher form of intelligence for him. He was probably, telling his mother what paired well together and what she should or shouldn't wear. Um, but when we look at the North Node, we see Chiron, we see the Sun, and you know, a couple other signatures here would denote, you know, having to really not follow what other people are doing in order to stay healthy. There is an asteroid here that I meant to remove, but since it's here, we'll talk about it. It's Hygeia, and this is the asteroid of health. So, in order to maintain the health of his life and his business, he needed to do things a little differently than what other people were doing. He needed to not indulge so much. But, he's got a lot of Venus, and, Neptune is there. Um, there's this, level of losing oneself and wanting to be in the fold with other people and wanting this other experience, and not wanting that party to end. Um, so I think that's where some of it lies. Does that make sense to you? In terms of looking at some of these dynamics that you like, yeah,
Yeah.
he really loved his mama. She really held him up. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay, so we will pull up the chart of